today, especially for the PS10 sample preparation system. And as such, I set myself a little challenge for you, and this is, can you automate your sample preparation in 10 minutes on the PS10? So let's see if we can. And so I would like to start with this quite short TBNK manual protocol. And maybe if you see this, you dream of automation. And maybe the PS10 might be useful for you in this. So what can the PS10 do? So basically you start with your blood sample or a sample. And in the first step, you define what the instrument should do with the sample. So add antibody, add sample, incubate, mix, stuff like that. Set up a procedure of what should be done. In the next step, you define what should be done for each daughter tube, which tests shall be run, which antibodies should be placed in the tube to stain the sample. And finally, you combine all these tests, these secondary tubes together into one panel that is generated from one primary tube. If we take a look inside the PS10, it looks like this. And in the lower part, you see here space for blood tubes, blood sample tubes. You can load up to 50 tubes at one time. And in case you encounter sometimes a tube which does not fit here, so they can fit several, we've got these 4 open positions where you can also place other tube types that you might want to analyze or use the PS10 for. Here to the right, you see space for up to 90 antibodies. This can be Sysmex, CE-IVD, RUO antibodies, but also antibodies from other vendors. For reagents, we've got these 2 open bottle positions here, for example, for fixed and perm solutions. And on the right, in the right side door of the PS10, there's space for 4 500 milliliter bottles for really large volumes, high throughput reagents. So again, fixation reagents, PBS, water, whatever you might think useful to have on the system. On the left, you see these 2 rotors, which are the carousels the PS10 is using to store the secondary tubes in. And as you might guess, you can use those also for cell wash procedures. And if you do so, you open up the side door of the PS10, take out the rotor and place it in the Rotolevit 2S cell wash centrifuge. And if required, you place it back in the PS10 and continue processing. All these different elements are also included in the inventory screen of the PS10 software, as you can see it here. So it's really easy to understand, easy to see. But let's get started to transfer our manual protocol to the PS10. So on the right-hand side, we see once again the inventory. And the first thing we do is we click up here and select the procedure editor to get the working steps in order. So the first part is add 50 microliters of blood. We do this, and we call our procedure the myelase no wash procedure. As a second step, we add an antibody or cocktailing step here. And we have these 6 single antibodies, but you might wonder, okay, but this is a TBNK. I actually am using a predefined cocktail. You can do so, please do. Then it's just the single step. If you want, for this example here, say we have 6 individual antibodies, could be anything, then you just add 6 antibody pipetting steps. And the next thing is we want a short mix. So we select a mix step. Then we want to incubate for 10 to 15 minutes. So incubation step, 10 to 15 minutes. Select the lyse reagent. So we have a lyse buffer step and 500 microliters of the silyse FX reagent, for example, from Sysmex, very nice. The next step is another mixing step, and then a final incubation step for 10 to 15 minutes. And that's our procedure. However, we have not defined yet which antibodies or cocktails the system shall use. And to do this, we go back to the menu and in the inventory and select the test editor and choose our procedure, the myelase no wash procedure, define a test, my test, and this is 6 positions for antibodies or cocktails. And in our case, we just select the antibodies from the list inside the PS10, which you of course can extend for other antibodies as well. and include the 6 antibodies we want to use. That's our test. Finally, we want to set up a panel to tell the system, okay, from one primary tube, we have this secondary tubes. In our case, it's just the my test, just the one test we defined. So it's just one secondary tube. And yeah, well, to answer the question, can you automate your sample preparation system in 10 minutes on the PS10? I would say yes, but actually it's more than like 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So as we now still have a bit of time, I would like to show you how the assay we just set up would work or could be run on the PS10. So we're back on the inventory. First, we add the 500 milliliter bottle of our lysis reagent into this position, which turns blue when the instrument recognizes there's reagent in there. Then we place the 6 antibodies up here, also turning blue if reagent is registered to these positions. Then we define a rotor, in this case, a 24 position rotor with our procedure, and then define the samples, in this case, open positions. Now we could hit run and start the process. But before we do, the system is offering you a chance to see the rotor layout report. This is a file describing what you programmed on the system and what is supposed to be done with it. And you can use this to print such labels, as you can see here on the right, to label all the secondary tubes for the system. So you have them very nicely, have all the information like a QR code and human readable information you might want to need to keep a good track of what your sample is doing actually. But now we hit start. In our case, the whole process will take 28 minutes for the preparation, 2 incubation steps of 10 to 15 minutes in there. And if we fast forward a bit, we finally ended our run. And then we can take the samples, place them on a flow cytometer. If you have the Sysmex XF1600 flow cytometer, you can just place the rotor inside, hit start, and then off you go. And what I think personally is also very nice is the PS10 is offering you a report containing all the information relevant for the sample preparation, starting from who prepared the run down to what was the expiration date of this last antibody I used on the sample. So with these reports, you probably save a lot of time for documentation and still keep a very good traceability of what has been done to the sample to prepare it, which of course is very good for traceability and validation purposes. Okay, so you've seen the PS10 is a really flexible device, which on the other hand will of course offer you standardization as it's automated, so it's always the same. And so you can make the PS10 really your PS10 by programming it to what you need. So you can just place your assays on the system as we've just seen. You can add your reagents. So for example, as we prefer, Sysmex antibodies and lysis reagents. But if there's this one antibody your grandfather has already used and really likes and you would like to keep using it, no problem, PS10, you can place it on there and you can continue using it. Also, you can use your titrations. So if you say, for this antibody, I need a specific volume, just enter it in the PS10 and it can work with that. You can, of course, not only use antibodies, but also cocktails like prefabricated cocktails, also dry tubes are possible. And another functionality I did not even mention is the PS10 can also generate cocktails for you. So in the beginning of the week, you could sit down and say, okay, I need, I don't know, 100 samples, 100 tests of this assay. Then you could prepare a cocktail and use it during the week, or do it fresh every day, or for 2 weeks, as you prefer and as you validated it. And of course, you have also flexibility with your samples. So you have these blood tubes, you can load different kinds of blood tubes. And in the case they really do not fit, you have always the open positions. The PS10 comes pre-validated for peripheral blood, but it has 3 open positions where you could validate and enter other sample material as well. Okay, I guess this was pretty fast, so fast and curious. I hope maybe you're curious for more, and if you are, we are here for your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Timo. Fast and curious. Yeah. Fast and interesting. I hope I bet there will be a few questions from all the participants. Feel free to either just type your question in the chat, or if you like, open up your own mic and ask, if that's possible. And while we're waiting for any questions from the participants to come in, then maybe I'll ask one.
Sure.
Timo, you showed how the transfer of the secondary tubes from the sample preparation system to the cytometer goes. What about the rest of the information about those samples?
Oh, yes. So you can actually connect the PS10 to the flow cytometer, and the information is transferred of what panel has been used for which tube and which tube what is. So you don't have to retype in the name of all the samples on the flow cytometer again. You set it up on the PS10 and the flow cytometer will know the information.
Okay, that sounds
just
good.
to reduce errors.
Indeed. Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Then let's think, what could another question be?
Oh,
a lot of people ask about the time that it takes to process, but there is one. Thank you. Are the antibodies in a cool space in the machine?
Yes, they are. So there's, as I mentioned, space for 90 antibodies, and they come in these color-coded reagent blocks. They're made of metal, so you can pre-cool them in the fridge, and then they will keep cool for about half an hour, I would say. Inside the system, 2 of the 6 positions for these blocks are cooled to 2 to 8 degrees. There's a cover on top of it, and so your antibodies will be cool and dark. And I tested this with a light meter, and the light on the positions inside the PS10 is about 25 lux compared to, I don't know, 2000 in the room outside. And below the cover, it's below 1. So it's really, really dark. So you can just, in the cool positions, you can leave your antibodies or cocktails if you prepare some for the whole day. And they're as good as in a fridge, I would say.
Okay, there's another question that's come in. So the first one is, how does the rotor work with the centrifuge for lice wash protocols? One of the slides showed it, I think. I'm not.
Yeah, so
if you can describe it more.
How does the rotor work with the centrifuge for lice wash protocols? Actually, this is something, the centerpiece of what we Sysmex are doing there is not really the PS10. Actually, I personally would think it's the rotors, because you've got these swing out rotors which fit to all 3 instruments, to the PS10, the centrifuge, and the flow cytometer. So you just can carry them around. You can have them in separate places. You have the centrifuge not built into a big, humongous instrument, but have them apart. So you don't have the vibration of the centrifuge next to the flow cytometer, for example. And the rotors, they are, if you place them in a wash centrifuge and they turn clockwise, you can sediment the cells and pellet them. And then the centrifuge can stop, turn counterclockwise. And then the buckets for the tubes arrest and giving an outward tilt. So if it's turning counterclockwise, you can discard all the fluid, keep the pellet. And so you can really do washing 24 samples at once. This is really saving a lot of time, really making the system quite fast.
Right. Okay, thank you. There's another question which I'd like to get in, even though we've reached our official time, end time, and that is, how does it keep track of the volume of the antibodies? Do we have to check ourselves?
The PS10 has two probes to aspirate blood, so both pierce the blood samples, and one of the probes is aspirating the antibodies, cleaning in between, of course, and it has a sensor in the tip that's detecting when it touches the liquid level, and it knows the dimension and size of the antibody well. And from the position when it touches the liquid level, it can calculate how much volume is left in the antibodies and get quite good results. Low dead volume, it's working nicely. And of course, what I wanted to add is if the antibodies are almost empty, so less than one rotor is left, one full rotor, 25 tests, then it will turn the color to orange. When it's empty, it will turn to red. And in case you are within a run, and when an antibody gets empty, the system will inform you, give you time to replace the antibody, and then continue working.
Okay.
I hope this answered your questions.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat. We're very happy. There were some questions, and thank you for your attendance. If you want to know more, feel free to stop by the virtual booth. You can have another chat with Timo, and there's other ways to show you more about the PS10 system if you're interested. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.